He was pedaling hard to keep up, his bike tires humming over the rough country road while the flashlight beam bounced in front of him. Jacob Wetterling rode between his younger brother Trevor and his friend Aaron after a quick trip to the local convenience store to rent a video and grab a snack. It was a simple rule at home. You can ride out, but be back by your curfew. They were almost there. Then a man stepped out of a dark driveway with a gun in his hand and changed everything in a single moment. The man wore a mask and pointed the handgun straight at them. He ordered the boys off their bikes and told them to lie face down in the ditch. Gravel dug into Jacob's skin as he hit the ground. The stranger asked their ages one by one. Jacob said he was 11, Trevor was 10, Aaron was 11. The man's voice stayed calm, almost businesslike, as if he had rehearsed this. He told Trevor to stand up, turn, and run toward the nearby woods. If he looked back, the man said, he would shoot. Trevor ran, certain he might feel a bullet in his back at any second. The gunman then had Jacob and Aaron stand so he could see their faces. He pointed the weapon again and told Aaron to run the same way, with the same threat. Aaron hesitated until the man raised his voice and repeated the order. Aaron finally bolted, heart hammering. When he reached Trevor, they risked a glance back down the road. The ditch still held their bikes and the dropped flashlight. The masked man and Jacob were gone. The boys sprinted to the nearest house, pounding on the door and begging the couple inside to call the police. The 911 calls that went out from that farmhouse set off one of the largest missing child searches Minnesota had ever seen. Deputies from the Stearns County Sheriff's Office raced to the scene. They found the 3 bikes, the flashlight, and footprints, but no sign of the car that had taken Jacob, and no sign of the boy himself. Within hours, roads were blocked, cars were being stopped and checked, and officers were fanning out in every direction from that dark stretch of road. At the Wetterling home, patrol cars pulled into the driveway, while porch lights burned far later than usual. Just an hour earlier, Patty and Jerry Wetterling had watched their son leave for a routine errand. Now investigators were asking for recent photographs and a description of what he had been wearing. Inside the house, Aaron sat with deputies and tried to steady himself long enough to describe the masked man, the gun, the commands in the ditch. It was clear almost immediately that this was not a custody dispute or a runaway. Their son had been taken at gunpoint by a stranger. The search exploded in scope. Neighbors, firefighters, and volunteers turned out with flashlights and boots, walking shoulder to shoulder through ditches, fields, and tree lines. Helicopters swept the area from above. Divers checked ponds and nearby waterways. The FBI arrived to help manage the investigation, bringing in agents with experience in non-family child abduction cases. Flyers with Jacob's smiling school photo appeared at gas stations, grocery stores, and rest areas across the region. A tip line was set up, and calls poured in. From people who thought they had seen a suspicious car, from convicted offenders' neighbors, from psychics, from anyone who felt a tug of guilt or fear and needed to say something. Investigators tried to build the case from fragments. They focused on vehicles seen near the scene, especially a small car reported on the road that night. They re-examined earlier cases in nearby towns, including the abduction and sexual assault of a 12-year-old boy, Jared Shirel, months before. The method, a boy taken at night and forced into a car by a stranger, felt too similar to ignore. One local man, Danny Heinrich, came under suspicion. He was questioned, his shoes and car were tested, and his name went into the case files as a person of interest. But the physical evidence available at the time was not strong enough to charge him in Jacob's disappearance, and he walked out of the interview room a free man. As the seasons changed, the search shifted from frantic ground sweeps to slow, grinding investigative work. The road where Jacob had vanished became a place people drove past more quietly. His bedroom at home stayed largely as it had been, a space waiting for a child who never came back. The Wetterlings refused to retreat in silence. They spoke to the media, met with law enforcement, and turned their grief outward, forming what became the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center to teach families about child safety and push for stronger tracking of people convicted of crimes against children. Their advocacy helped lead to the federal Jacob Wetterling Act in 1994, which required states to create sex offender registries, a model that would be expanded nationally. Jacob's name entered law books even while his fate remained unknown. Inside police departments and prosecutors' offices, the case never really went away. New sheriffs took office, and fresh detectives inherited boxes of reports, photos, and lab results. Task forces were formed and disbanded. Tips still arrived every time the case was mentioned on television. Leads took investigators as far as other states and prisons, chasing confessions and rumors that eventually collapsed under scrutiny. Every time a body was found in the region, families waited to hear whether it might be Jacob. Over and over, the answer was no. One detail stayed in the files: Heinrich's name, tied to the earlier assault and to fiber evidence from a car he had driven. For years, that link remained unresolved. Then, in the mid-2000s, federal investigators revisited the older cases with new forensic tools. They retested materials from Jared's assault and renewed their focus on Heinrich. In 2015, agents searched his home and seized computers. Inside, they found a large collection of child sexual abuse material. Heinrich was charged in federal court on pornography offenses, serious charges that finally gave prosecutors leverage they had never had in the Wetterling case. While he sat in custody on those federal charges, investigators confronted him again about Jacob. Negotiations stretched on for months. Finally, in 2016, a deal emerged. Heinrich would plead guilty to one count related to child pornography and, in exchange, admit in open court what he had done to Jacob and lead authorities to the boy's remains. Prosecutors agreed not to charge him separately with murder in state court if he told the full truth. For Patty and Jerry, it was a brutal choice. Accept that their son's killer would never be tried for murder, or go on not knowing where Jacob was or what had happened in his final hours. They agreed to the deal, choosing answers and the chance to bring their son home over the uncertainty they had lived with for almost 3 decades. In late August 2016, Heinrich directed investigators to a field near Paynesville, about 30 miles from the abduction site. Search teams moved carefully over the ground, digging and sifting. They found pieces of clothing, bones, and teeth. Forensic testing confirmed what everyone feared. The remains were Jacob's. The boy who had vanished during a bike ride on a fall night in Minnesota had been buried there all along. Days later, in a federal courtroom, Heinrich stood under oath and described the crime in stark detail. He said he had been driving near St. Joseph that night with a scanner in his car when he saw the boys. He parked, masked himself, and confronted them with an unloaded revolver. After sending Trevor and Aaron away, he forced Jacob into his car, handcuffed him, and drove to a remote area near Paynesville. There, he assaulted him. When he later heard sirens and knew law enforcement was mobilizing, he decided to eliminate the only witness. He took Jacob a short distance away, ordered him to turn around, and shot him. He then buried the body in a shallow grave. A year later, concerned that the site might be disturbed, he returned, dug up the remains, and reburied them in the field where they were finally discovered in 2016. Patty and Jerry sat in the courtroom as the man who had taken their son spoke about it in the flat tone of someone telling a routine story. They listened to the sequence they had imagined and dreaded for years, now confirmed in a few minutes of testimony. There was no rescue missed, no hidden room where Jacob had waited. According to Heinrich's own words, Jacob had died the same night he was taken from that road. Heinrich received a 20-year federal sentence on the pornography charge, the maximum allowed. Under the terms of the agreement and his designation as a dangerous offender, he is expected to remain in federal custody for the duration of that sentence, with civil confinement a possibility afterward. For many in Minnesota and beyond, the outcome felt incomplete, closure without real justice, but it finally answered the questions that had haunted the case since 1989. Jacob Wetterling's abduction changed more than one family. It changed the way parents talked to their children about safety, how police approached non-family abductions, and how the law tracks those who harm children. His name is embedded in federal statutes and child safety programs, and his parents continue to speak for families facing the same fear they once did. Yet beneath all of that, the core story remained painfully direct. 3 boys rode home on their bikes, a man with a gun chose one, and a community spent 27 years searching for the truth about what happened next. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.